It is exciting to be like, maybe Sam Darnold can step up. He's got the weapons. But if you really look back at his career, you will remember, it's hard to remember just how bad he was, but he was that bad.
Let's just start off talking about the fantasy footballers. You guys are going into a 10th season. What kind of work goes into creating such a successful show and staying on top like this for so long?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of surreal to have done this many years of fantasy football now. But I still think it comes down to just like inside this building, we are still the 3 most competitive fantasy football players that we have come across. So that kind of, that competitive nature, loving the game, riding the highs, bemoaning the lows, like, I think if we lost any of that, it would probably
that would show
really quickly on the show.
Yeah, that would definitely show. And I would say, when we started 10 years ago, we did everything. The 3 of us were the show. We were the producers. We were the editors, the writers, the video editors, everything. And so now we've assembled over time, just one at a time, just a great human being after great human being that works so hard and is so passionate
Makes it
about
easy on us.
What we do that we don't do anything anymore.
Yeah, it's it's not just that they help with the work. It's they also bring the same level of passion about a silly game, right? Yeah, a game about a game, and yet, but it's everybody in this building is talking fantasy football all the time. We sit down with everyone and we eat lunch together every single day. Football is going to be a part of that conversation every single day because we love football and we love fantasy football so much. So I think that is a huge part of the success of people feel like when they listen to the show, they're listening to like-minded people who love the game as much as they do.
I do have fantasy questions, so I want to start there and just ask for each of you guys to give me your one biggest hot take for the fantasy season.
Well, I'll hop in here right off the bat, and I'm going to say that Devon Achane is going to be a league-winning, next year when we're at drafts, he's going to be a top 3 pick. So this is a guy who we haven't seen someone with his speed on the field since CJ2K. You're talking about not fast. We're talking about faster than every fast guy in the NFL. He was explosive as a rookie, but he still started a little slow, got injured from time to time. So there's question marks there that I think are letting him drop to the 2nd, sometimes the 3rd round in drafts. And next year, if he's healthy this year, he's one of the best options in fantasy. I think he's got the capability in the receiving game and with long touchdowns to finish as the running back 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've talked about here to bring something else to the table is you have a lot of turnover in teams that make the playoffs and then miss the playoffs year to year in the NFL. No one ever sees it coming. Last year it was Houston, right? Like we didn't expect C.J. Stroud to come out and take the league by storm, and all of a sudden they're a playoff contender. You went into drafts thinking, I don't want anybody on the Texans because they're not going to perform for me. One of those teams that I think is going to surprise people is from where we're at here in Arizona is the Cardinals' offense and what that means for fantasy football. Kyler, over the second half of the year, they were actually a top half offense. People don't notice that. They look at the end of the year. He only played half the year. And bringing in Marvin Harrison, what Trey McBride's been able to do. James Conner was a beast down the stretch. I think that's one of those non-playoff teams that gets ignored a little bit, and that means value in fantasy.
And I'll jump in that we're seeing, right now, Caleb Williams is the hotness for Chicago. Like not just NFL-wise, but in fantasy football, he's being drafted as a really high pick, despite being a rookie quarterback. And it's the wrong rookie quarterback that people are going to be really talking about next year. It's going to be Jaden Daniels. He's going to come in. He gives us a difference-making because he runs, and we score more points when a fantasy football quarterback runs than when they throw. And he could throw. So I think that going into next year, Jaden Daniels, who's being drafted at the end of drafts, if at all, is going to be one of those guys that just absolutely jumps on a rocket ship in terms of where people are drafting him.
Are those the biggest sleepers at quarterback to you guys that people aren't talking about? I know Sam Darnold could be another guy who might.
Nope.
Surprise. No. Okay.
No. Let me hop right in there. That's
immediately no.
That's a no. He has Justin Jefferson, and he would need to add to that prime Jerry Rice and Randy Moss. And then maybe. And then he'll probably, and then the answer would be Nick Mullins would be the quarterback you would want. Sam Darnold, we were looking at it today because obviously the devastating news of J.J. McCarthy, his injury, missing his rookie season, it's very, very sad. And so it is exciting to be like, maybe Sam Darnold can step up. He's got the weapons. But if you really look back at his career, you will remember, it's hard to remember just how bad he was, but he was that bad. I mean, you're talking about a guy who peaks at like 20 passing touchdowns. And if you look at his last 2 years as a starter, so we're not talking about rookie or sophomore year, we're talking third-year player, fourth-year player. He had some injuries. But if you project his full season slate of the games that he played and you just give him those stats for every game, he would have thrown 12 touchdowns in one season and 13 in the other. That's not getting it done for fantasy football. Even if they can find a way to win games with protecting the ball, which they won't, then he won't be good for fantasy. He's not going to throw enough touchdowns.
They have enough injuries, Jason. They don't need to catch more strays.
I feel so bad for Vikings fans. I really do. But the good news is the draft pick in 2025.
I had to ask. I won't be drafting Sam Darnold either. How does that impact Justin Jefferson? I know he was, number one ADP last year, I think. How far should he be sliding in drafts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a kind of a variety of opinions on that. The hardest thing is when you have a player that on talent alone is the best in the game. Like we've actually been here with some Hall of Fame caliber wide receivers in the past where, Larry Fitzgerald in Arizona went through a couple of thin years at quarterback where John Skelton was his starter, and it devastated his numbers for a couple of years. And then you even saw it with DeAndre Hopkins where he went before the Deshaun Watson years. You had kind of an intermediate period where you were questioning kind of whether he can perform to the same level. And Jefferson, on talent alone, is going to give you some of those winning weeks. I think we're worried about consistency. We're worried about the fact that, he may be the number 2 receiver on a certain week, but maybe Sam's not got it going that next week, and all of a sudden you're limited on your upside.
Yeah, I still think he's going to be overall great for fantasy football. It's just this
would have been the number 1 overall pick if Kirk Cousins was still the quarterback.
Yeah, it's very possible, and it's just more of a the other guys who are kind of in the same tier, like A.J. Brown. Do you take A.J. Brown now over Justin Jefferson? It's absolutely a fair question. But at the end of last year, Justin Jefferson was playing with basically third-string quarterbacks, and he still had multiple games of over 20 points, 20 fantasy points. So I think it'll just be a little bit more inconsistent than we're used to, where when everything was rolling for Jefferson and Kirk Cousins, it was every single week, I know that Jefferson's going to be great, and it can't be that.
I always struggle with what to do with quarterbacks in drafts. And Mina Kimes had a funny tweet the other day about not drafting a quarterback until the 4th round. Do you guys agree with that overall strategy?
Overall, I think we do. Yeah, I think, this is one of those things where since the beginning of this show, we've generally leaned towards waiting on quarterbacks because you start 2 running backs, you start at least 2 wide receivers. You have these really important positions that you need more than one of. And if you can find the value later in drafts, which used to be a little easier to do, because I remember players like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, they used to, before their breakout seasons, they would go later in drafts. That's still the best way to build your team. It's just a matter of, can you identify those guys? Sometimes it's taking the last quarterback that you have confidence in your draft, which might be in the 4th or 5th round. I know we like, you mentioned the sleepers. We like Jaden Daniels. We like Kyler Murray. You can get Dak later in drafts. Mm-hmm. Jared Goff on one of the top 5 offenses.
With the opening schedule that is delicious.
Yeah, and that's one way to play it is just pay attention to that first part of the season. And if you can ride a guy for 5 or 6 weeks, Tua starts every season on fire, ends them in a disaster.
Cold, but
it is the best way to build your team if you can get top tier talent at these important positions and then kick the can down the road on quarterback.
Yeah, I would add Joe Burrow to that list. You've got C.J. Stroud going so many rounds earlier than Joe Burrow, and what we're hoping is that C.J. Stroud can become Joe Burrow. Why don't you just grab Joe Burrow a couple rounds later? He's done it multiple years. C.J. Stroud, I hope he does it, but he's never done it yet. And throw away the injured year last year between his calf, his late season injury, and the wide receiver core.
If you guys can't tell from the sign behind me, I'm a big Giants fan, so I love Saquon Barkley in Philly, but I am questioning Jalen Hurts. I saw a stat that without the tush push, he would go from QB2 to QB16. So how far should he be falling with Jason Kelce gone? Will that have an impact?
Yeah, go ahead. I know what you're going to say.
Well, I don't think it makes a gigantic impact. It's not like without the tush push. I mean, that stat saying he'd go to there, it's not like he would have gone to 0 rushing touchdowns. He had 15. And I do think, like I said about Saquon, he's going to convert some of those carries inside the 5. Swift was awesome at going down at the 1, and that really benefited Jalen Hurts because if they're at the 1 with Kelce or without Kelce, they're going to tush push. It's too high a conversion percentage to call a different play. And so I think you take about 5 touchdowns away from him from last year, and that probably moves him still in the top 3 quarterbacks. I'm not personally very worried.
And it's what does the passing attack look like now, where you have the addition of Kellen Moore, who, yes, Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, has been jumping around from job to job, but Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator for fantasy football, has given us really, really good numbers, far more innovative, actually moving players around. We're getting lots of reports of both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, like rotating, getting them in the slot, finding mismatches. So that's where I'm excited for Jalen Hurts maybe some of the rushing touchdowns go down, but can that be balanced out by passing touchdowns?
Hey, sports fans, if you want to see more conversations with athletes and stars, check out these videos right here and be sure to subscribe for more from USA Today Sports.